What is anxiety? Anxiety is the body's natural response to stress. When the body becomes stressed, adrenaline, a hormone produced in the brain, is released into the blood. This triggers the fight or flight response, which is an instinctual process that occurs to prepare us for stressful events. Our pupils dilate, our breathing quickens, and blood rushes to the muscles. Some of the different types of anxiety disorders are generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and phobias, which are the type of anxiety that I will be talking about. So, what are phobias? Phobias are persistent irrational fears. They can develop at any point in a person's lifetime. The origin of phobias is not totally understood, but there are ideas that they are possibly hereditary and that they stem from traumatic or stressful events. There are two types of phobias: specific, such as claustrophobia and arachnophobia, and complex, such as agoraphobia and social phobia. The anatomy of phobias is important to understand. One system in our body is the nervous system, which controls the nerves and tells them all to communicate with each other. This allows us to think, move, and maintain homeostasis, keeping us alive without us even knowing it. The nervous system consists of the brain, the spinal cord, the sensory organs, such as the eyes, ears, nose, and tongue, and some nerves. If you look closely, there are two small, almond-shaped glands in the brain called the amygdala. These glands are essential in the anatomy of phobias because they control emotion, memories, and the fear response I was talking about earlier. Because the fear response is instinctual, once we experience something fearful, the amygdala automatically signals our nervous system of our fears before we have time to perceive them, and we go into fight or flight mode. We actually have very little control over what we fear and how we react to those fears. So, how does virtual reality play into this? First of all, virtual reality, or VR, is the immersion in a completely digital environment with computers and face masks. You might be wondering how it can possibly help people with anxiety or phobias. The most known use of VR these days is in video games, but VR can actually be a type of exposure therapy, meaning that it can be used to gradually expose patients to feared stimuli without real danger, because they are in a digital world. It is currently being studied whether virtual reality therapy is an equal or even better alternative to in vivo, or real-life, therapy, and many experiments have been done to determine this. The experiment I found specifically discusses acrophobia, the fear of heights. The goal of the experiment was to test the difference between in vivo and VR therapies on acrophobic people, to see whether one helps the acrophobia better than the other. The main 3 tests were administered to both groups 3 times. Here's the timeline for the 4 steps of the experiment. The first step was testing before the therapy. The second step was the therapy, the third step was testing after therapy, and the last step was a follow-up testing appointment 6 months later. The first of the 3 tests was the behavioral avoidance test. This tested to see whether the subjects were truly acrophobic by testing how high they could climb a set of stairs. The subjects had to climb a set of stairs 38 feet tall while looking over the edge and without touching the railing. If they succeeded to climb up the whole set of stairs, they passed. Otherwise, they failed. The next test was the acrophobia questionnaire, which consisted of a 120-point anxiety section and a 60-point avoidance section. The final test was the attitude towards heights questionnaire, which was one section worth 60 points. These 2 questionnaires were used to determine the nature of each participant's acrophobia, and lower scores were considered better. The therapy sessions were the main determinant of difference between the 2 groups of subjects. Each participant in the groups went to either an in vivo or a VR therapy session once a week for 3 weeks, in which each participant visited 3 anxiety-inducing environments. The first environment was a big shopping mall that had 4 floors and some escalators. The second environment was a fire escape with railings and landings, and the third environment was a roof garden. During each of the sessions, the participants were told to go onto the high levels and look down at ground level without holding on to anything. This table shows the results of the experiment. This might be hard to understand, so I'll give you the important information. If you look at the average number of feet climbed on the BAT for both groups before the therapy and after the therapy, you can see that they both increased by about 5 feet. And if you look at the average scores for all the categories of the questionnaires for both groups, they all decreased by about the same amounts. Because the numbers changed the same amount for both groups, these results can therefore be considered positive results, because what happened was what the experimenters wanted to happen. The VR therapy worked just as well as the in vivo therapy, if not better, because the therapies reduced the subject's acrophobic anxiety considerably.